This is a question as old as time, I feel like, in the art space, but when does referencing somebody's art style get too far? Because we have a situation where there is accusation of art tracing, whereas the other person denies it, but just says that they're heavily inspired by the artist's style. We'll look at this, but it's definitely a really messy scenario. And again, disclaimer before diving in, please don't send hate to any parties involved. So this all kicks off like 3 days ago with a post by user Nalo Arts on Threads, writing, "Since when do we accept artists tracing another artist's work? I'm asking this to my 70 plus mutuals that are following an artist that's very blatantly tracing Frostbite's work, even for commissions. You can match the heads perfectly. We're all against Gen AI, right? Apart from the environmental factor, there's no difference ethically between tracing directly or letting AI generate the slop. Just because Frostbite is big doesn't mean it's okay." So for a little lore, if you guys aren't in the book space, right? There's artists that draw art in a variety of different like fandoms, etc. And within the book space of bookish artists and readers, there's a couple notable artists that stand out at the top in terms of paving the way for popular book art and popular book art styles. And one of the most popular ones, in my personal opinion, and their following count speaks for themselves, is this person by the name of Frostbite Studios. I absolutely adore their artwork. Their art style is beautiful. I love everything about it. The art is, I want to eat it. You know what I mean? Like, beautiful. I love the way they draw lines and the way they render. I cannot put it into words. Everything comes together to create like the most beautiful artworks ever. They bring book characters to life. Could not glaze their art enough. Their art is so beloved to the point that the way they perceive book characters and bring them to life in some people's eyes is canon. This is Carden from Holly Black's series The Cruel Prince, and Frostbite Studios' rendition of Carden and Jude. This being Jude is probably the most popular out there. When you think of book characters for The Cruel Prince, Frostbite's art is probably like the first thing that comes to mind. So the whole point of me saying all of this is to put into perspective, like they have an art style that people love to replicate. And like a lot of people are inspired by their art style. I love their art style. It leads to a point where there are a lot of artists that kind of crop up with art styles that look really similar to Frostbite's art style. And again, it is completely okay to be inspired by somebody's art style. That is literally how everybody came to be. I'm sure Frostbite is inspired by other numerous artists, just like how there's a lot of people who are inspired by mangakas or like Studio Ghibli or insert other popular media title, whatever, artists, right? But then there are some people that take it a little bit too far. So yesterday, Nalo puts out an update, writing, "I don't condone bullying. Please don't harass her. This post is mainly for awareness." And they write, "After my vague post yesterday about an artist blatantly tracing Frostbite's art, I received a lot of messages and comments. I started to consider naming the artist properly. I had proof after all. It's just that they're so much bigger than me, and I was worried about the backlash if I did." Now, somebody told her I made a vague post about her, and that shared the evidence around, and the artist in question reached out. So the artist in question is this person. They're a French artist, so I'm so sorry for my pronunciation. Their name is Inez, and this is the handle here. But they basically write like, "Oh, I found that you've been accusing me of tracing Frostbite's work, and I don't understand this. I want to be clear, I do not trace Frostbite's work. My art is my own. And like many artists, I've been influenced by creators I admire, but I don't trace their pieces. Being spoken about and discredited like this is not acceptable, even if it's happening in private. And I want to address things with you directly now. If you need proof of my integrity, I would be happy to provide it. But if you have an issue with my work, please talk to me first." And Nalo adds, "Because there's been no proper accountability during my convo with the artist, I decided to name them." Because here the artist is denying it, right? And then they proceed to add a bunch of evidence that was provided over 2 months of people sending it to them. And when you look at the evidence, it gets a little bit, oh, we got this side by side with, the left being Frostbite's artwork, the right being Inez's work. And okay. Because here, the artist, after being presented with the proof, immediately turned around in DMs and admitted to tracing. So with these two, Inez says, "First of all, the two pieces you sent to me were indeed traced. Didn't you just say you didn't trace their work?" And then they continue, "But I credited Frost in each post and they've since been deleted." Where you can see the captions before they were deleted. It says post style reference to Frostbite Studios. This is what I'm guessing the translation is. Here we have inspiration by Frostbite Studios. And this is what I mean, right? You're like, okay, sure. To give them credit, they, I guess, tagged Frostbite Studios in it, which like a lot of other people who trace don't do that. But guys, like tracing people's work isn't okay. And just because you credit them in the caption doesn't suddenly make the fact that you trace their artwork okay, unless the artist explicitly said, that you can do it. Like, it's like the equivalent of like, I don't know, you went to a grocery store and you stole some food and you came back and then you were like, oh yeah, well, like this isn't my milk tea. I stole it from Odd One Out. Like, you still stole it, you know? Just because you said you did it didn't mean it suddenly made it okay. I feel like that's the thing, right? Because like tracing an artist's work is like for the most part a de facto no. Like most artists by default are not going to be okay with you doing it. It's only okay if they specify it's okay. Some artists, for instance, would make free bases that you can go draw on top of, and they would just say like, oh yeah, feel free to use the base. You don't need to credit me. Then it's fine. Then you can do it. This is not one of those cases. And also, there is the deception in wording. And potentially, I don't know if English is Inez's first language or not, because they seem to be like French speaking as well. So I don't know if French is like their predominant language. But the person who responds, this probably is Nalo, says, inspired doesn't clarify that it's traced. Also, another thing too that people will always say like, oh, an artist doesn't own a pose, like da 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 da. Yes, that is most definitely true. Frostbite doesn't own the pose of holding object looking like this. If you guys know Molly T, you know what this is. But like, Frostbite obviously doesn't own the concept of this pose. You don't own the concept of a pose, but like Frostbite owns the copyright to their drawing specifically. And this is traced off of their drawing. So here are 18 pieces of evidence. Oh, this one is very damning, the Cardin one. This one, I would say is less so. Like, maybe it's like a similar pose. The hand! Oh my lord. Another one of Cardin in this pose specifically. Like, look at the hair. This face is also very one-to-one. And there's that Jude drawing that I was showing you. And look at the girl's face. Oh, the nose and the mouth for this one. Looking at the evidence, I again do agree there's some pieces that are a bit of a stretch. It's like potentially it was just like similar pose. They were just like referencing how you would reference a normal art piece, right? And then there's some that it's like, dude, that's the same hands. That's the same face. And then again, this Cardin one specifically, Cardin being this character again, it's very damning. The whole body pose, everything. And what makes it look so obvious too is because it's the same characters. This is also Cardin and Jude from the same book series. There's like no changes that were made. And then so Nalo sent these two images over to the artist Inez, and Inez says, now you've really lost it, right? There's absolutely no resemblance. I feel like you're just trying to bring me down. I feel like no resemblance is a bit of a stretch. This one, again, should give benefit of doubt. This one, you can maybe argue that there's like a pose of two people touching hands. It's not like the most unseen pose ever, right? So like maybe they use the same reference photo or something. I will point out though, it's a bit interesting that the hair, okay, just look at Elphaba's hair and look at this character's hair. The way the braid splits just looks kind of similar. It's splitting in the same two strands, which is a bit specific. But benefit of doubt, maybe we could say this one's a bit of a loose reference. But the Cardin in this one is very similar. And Nalo writes, those artworks align perfectly, which I also double checked in the past hours. Yet when I demanded further explanation from her, she accused me of losing it. Also, she didn't just trace the lower example, she used the entire concept. A star between the hands, the hair flowing in the same direction. And Nalo writes, she was able to convince me of one evidence that I received to be too exaggerated, but that's it. So this was art piece of this piece specifically, which is from the book series, The Night and the Moth. I have it, but I haven't read it yet. I'm very excited for it. I was just waiting for book 2 to come out. But the artist says, there's no resemblance, the angle isn't even the same, and you're just coming up with evidence out of thin air. And you don't know me, yet you talk about me and judge my work behind my back. So the artist continues, you look for the smallest detail to prove my work is traced and copied, even though you know it's not true. Yes, I might have made mistakes, but my work is not copied and it shows. And so here, Nalo basically took back the one about the Night and the Moth, but basically was like, everything else, I haven't seen enough examples of it being made originally by you. And Nalo adds that there were more speed paints that were sent. One filmed with a camera focused on their hand while drawing, sped up and edited, and the other was a speed paint from Procreate, which again, we all know Procreate speed paints can be faked, so it's a bit hard to tell. So basically, the TLDR of what Inez responded was basically like, I wish you came to me privately. The hate didn't come out of nowhere. And I admit I made mistakes, but everything is exaggerated. And so a long list was basically sent by the person who made the call out, and Inez responds about the Cardin piece, right? Adding, I indeed used part of her illustrations as references, but that is not tracing. It's referencing. My real mistake was not mentioning it, and I acknowledge that that was not okay. But we grow and we learn. It was not meant to be hidden, as I'm telling you now, but simply because I didn't see the harm. And they're adding that, you're simply convinced that I'm a copy and tracer, and I know this discussion won't go anywhere. And Nalo adds, I wish to see her grow and develop her own ideas and style, as she can obviously draw beautifully. However, I find her current behavior, frankly, unacceptable, not only towards Frostbite, but also towards the community supporting her and the authors paying her for commissions. So I think this drives like a big question, right? Like, when does referencing go too far? Because the artist in question, Inez, was like, yes. So basically, they finally backtrack, right? They were like, fine, I admit it. I referenced the pose for Cardin here, but like, I drew everything myself, trust me. If we're referencing, you're cutting out pieces of another person's artwork, putting it under your artwork and drawing over it. That's called tracing. Or maybe I'm missing something here. I don't know. For all intents and purposes, tracing things that you have copyright to is fine. If you want to trace faces off your own artwork, go for it. You want to trace your own body from a picture you took, fine. Frostbite has posted videos about their art process where they it's so funny. They take pictures of their family members as references. Like, you want to trace over that? Fine. That's all your stuff. You have the total right to do that. 3D models, you're allowed to trace over that. That's completely fine. The issue is when you start tracing over stuff you don't have the copyright to, like somebody else's artwork. But the artist is making the explanation, Inez is saying, oh, I only referenced the pose off of Frostbite's work specifically. So that's what she said. And then you can look at it with your own eyes and make your own judgment. Do you think that this is just a reference? Do you think the pose and stuff was traced off of Frostbite's work and then the rendering was like obviously done by Inez? It's a bit tricky, right? It's a bit close to comfort. And this always drives back to like the main point, right? Where it's like, again, if you were basically only referencing off of one person's artwork, intentional or not, you're going to start crossing some really fuzzy lines and your art is going to end up looking really similar to their art. So the best way is always just, reference and be inspired by multiple people. Pinterest boards with multiple artists on there. Because that's the beauty of it, right? Like creating a piece with your own identity. And Nalo also adds that tracing can be used in a legitimate way. And I want to emphasize this, right? Like tracing in the artistic process is completely fine if you do it ethically with materials that you have the rights to. If you don't have the rights to it and you're tracing over other people's work, that's where we get like, hey, that's not cool. And here's what some people in the comments had to say. This commenter says, even if they didn't trace the art, you just don't use an artist's artwork as reference to just copy it and replace it with another character. How is that acceptable? You don't own a pose, and I completely agree about this, but you can use the same pose and not make the artwork look exactly the same. At this point, it's copyright infringement, and I don't understand people who don't see the problem. It's being blind at this point. Another person says, I want to clarify because I'm anxious now. It's difficult for me sometimes to create my own poses for art, and I often look at existing art. But I don't copy them, I just take it as a reference. I create the composition myself, outline the figures, etc. Isn't that a crime? People in the comment section are like, back and forth about it, but they're saying that referencing and tracing are two different things, and it's okay to use references, which I completely agree. It is fine to use references even if you're using other art pieces as a reference. Just, don't draw over their art piece and then insert your character in there. That's called tracing. And another person says, unfortunately for them, I wouldn't call something simple inspiration when it lines up perfectly. And there's also something to be said about being so closely inspired by another artist working in the same niche as you, being your contemporary, that your art just starts looking the same. But I don't think Threads is ready for this conversation. And Nalo adds some clarification. And I think this is helpful because like every time there's posts like this, it does bring in fear from people. Look, and this is at least like my 2 cents. Like if you're not tracing somebody's art, you have nothing to be afraid of. You know what I mean? Because you didn't do it. But then if you are drawing over people's artwork and then claiming it is your own work, then I guess you have grounds to be a bit concerned because what you're doing, not cool. You can trace over your own artwork. That's totally fine. Just don't do it over other people's stuff. And Nala writes, nobody needs to be scared if they're not tracing other artists' art or using AI. My post wasn't about creating paranoia. It was about accountability. And that the artist said it was heavily inspired with no acknowledgement or responsibility. However, there are characters that line up exactly, which is tracing. And that's where, in my opinion, it crossed from influence into something else. And they also add a side thing about a different artist who's traced, who came into their DMs saying they took full responsibility, apologized, worked on redrawing all commissions, and deleted all the trace works. And Nalo adds that that is taking responsibility. And then there's some clarification about like the proof aspect, but Nalo continues, and about tracing specifically, no two artists draw the exact same line. Ever. If it happened once, maybe you could call it a coincidence, a one-in-a-lifetime experience. But repeated, perfectly aligning lines are not a coincidence. That is a pattern. And I feel like that's the thing too, right? Like, even if you are referencing only off of one art piece, which again, discourage you from doing that because your art is gonna just end up looking really similar to the one reference photo, just use more than one. Even if you were to reference it, okay, but you didn't trace, you just have it open on like a little reference monitor, whatever, it's not gonna look one-to-one. It wouldn't overlap one-to-one. The only time that would really happen, unless you were some like prospective god genius or an insane fluke of luck, is if you traced. So that's where it's just like, hey, how did that happen? So at the end of the day, the artist has not made a public statement on their page. Don't go and send hate to them. Hopefully they just, maybe learn to not do that. They didn't take responsibility, but maybe they would stop. I don't know. They're clearly capable of drawing. So it's just, use more than one artist as a reference, and then you can develop a style that's more uniquely yours and don't trace people's work. Yay. So what are your thoughts about this? Do you think this is just heavy referencing, or do you think it's actually tracing? Well, we did have the artist admit to tracing a couple pieces, but about everything in general. We'd love to hear your thoughts. With respect, my cat woke up in the comment section. You guys hear him? Hello? He's like sleeping behind my monitor. My cat's saying I'm done with this video. Peace out, guys. So hope to catch y'all in another video. If you guys like it, I appreciate it. If you like and subscribe, don't forget to check me out on Etsy or on Coffee. Good morning, my son. YouTube want to see you. You want to come here? He doesn't want you guys to see him. Maybe my editor will put up a picture of Corn, my big cat. Anyways, I'm petting my cat. I hope to catch you in another video. Bye-bye.